Coming to you from the heart of the Great White North. Welcome to the Canadian Prepper Podcast. Immerse yourself in the world of preparedness with insights from seasoned experts and a touch of Canadian practicality. Your go-to source for all things survival, resilience, and self-reliance. Now, let's kick off another episode packed with knowledge and strategies to ensure you're ready for whatever life may throw your way. Stay tuned and let the journey to preparedness begin.
Welcome to episode 246 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We are recording August 18th, 2024. I'm Jeff. I'm your host for tonight. I'm based in Central Ontario. I'm a target shooter, ham radio operator, general overall handyman, and weather nerd.
And I'm the frugal gunny. I'm an off-grider, shooter, hunter, fisher, gatherer, trapper type, and a generalist. I only recently came to accept that I'm a prepper. And I also encourage and live a mobility approach to survival.
If you want to help support the show, please buy some swag. We have both the Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt and the tactical Velcro patch at www.prepperpodcast.ca. All proceeds help us cover our podcast costs.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and submit a review wherever you found us. We want your feedback, even if it's bad. We also invite you to reach out and to tell us about something you learned this week. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
So we have some thoughtful content for you in this episode. We'll start off with some relevant news, update our personal preps, and then we'll get into the main topic, prepper mindset. So we'll jump right into the news that I've got. I've got a couple of articles here, mostly pertaining to supply chain issues and stuff like that. So I mentioned it on the last podcast, but CN and CPKC, so that's Canadian Pacific, Kansas City Railways, are looking to go on strike as of Wednesday, or Thursday, actually, I guess, or Wednesday night, the 22nd. They've already started scaling back their operations. They're no longer accepting any cargo that is hazardous. So things like pesticides, I'll touch on one in a second that I'll get to. They're also no longer accepting anything that may be perishable or need to be cool. Meat, fish, that kind of stuff. Some medications that need to be kept cool. Obviously, they don't want them stuck on a rail car somewhere in the middle of nowhere when they go on strike. So, but the one big thing that I want to touch on, and everybody knows we really don't fearmonger here. We're not that Canadian prepper. But having said that, there is one vital item that this railway moves, and that is chlorine. And anybody who knows, unless you are a rich mucky muck with a pool, chlorine is used to as a water purifier by cities, municipalities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they've already stopped putting it on their cars and delivering it. I've done some digging and some background, and they don't stockpile a lot of chlorine for obvious reasons. I mean, it's dangerous for one, of course, and just there's a lot of government regulations that they can't stockpile a lot of this stuff. So I don't believe for a second, as much as I don't like the Liberals, I don't believe for a second that they would let this strike go on if it came to the point where municipalities or whatever were starting to have an issue getting chlorine for their water and stuff like that. But, they've already stopped running it. The strike goes on for a few days or whatever before somebody steps in. You never know what's going to happen. I would hate to believe a government would put us in that spot and they wouldn't step in for our best interest. So having said that, all I'm going to say is this. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to just get a bottle of bleach. Have bleach around your house. It's good for all kinds of other things, but it can be used to purify your water if it would ever get to that. Just get, it needs to be straight, pure bleach, no colors, no scents, no any of that stuff. Straight, regular bleach. Buy yourself a bottle, maybe get a little dropper, and just have that on hand in case. I highly doubt that it would ever come to that. I'm just doing my part to kind of throw that out there, but like I say, it's I can't believe that they would let it go on that long, that would become a problem. So I'll just leave that at that. The second supply chain issue coming down the pipe is the East Coast longshoremen. So those are the guys that run the ports and unload the container ships and all that stuff. They are set to strike at the end of September. You remember last year it was the West Coast. Now it's the East Coast longshoremen that they have to give 60-day strike notice. They've given that. They would be in a legal strike position on October 1st. Container companies and shipping companies are already starting to reroute some of their ships west. So just something to keep an eye on. Again, just supply chain issues. A lot of stuff that comes over there isn't life-threatening stuff or things that are going to cause problems. You just, you're not going to get your Amazon delivery this month or whatever. So, but just something to be aware of.
Logistics are definitely going to be challenged by this all around.
Pardon?
Create choke points. It's going to create choke points in the supply chains. That's definitely.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Going to happen.
Yep. And if anybody remembers, that you probably do, back in 2020 when there was the rail blockade in Ontario by the First Nations members, and that caused a lot of problems, especially in Quebec with propane and propane deliveries and that. We don't have to worry about that now because it's obviously summer, but that was a more or less localized shutdown, shall we say. It wasn't countrywide. This is going to be a countrywide shutdown. Every train across Canada, if the strike happens, is going to be parked. So it's not that you can get it from somewhere else and move it some other way. It's going to cause a lot of problems.
Take heed.
Yep. So we'll move on to what we've done lately for preps. I didn't do a lot. I've done some fuel rotation, and I helped out a neighbor who's in a bit of a position. So I cut and split and delivered a couple trailer loads of firewood over for them. So they've got something when it gets cold, and I'll just leave it at that. So.
Well, on my end, I've had an awful lot going on since I was last on. I completely relocated to a whole new location near work, and that was quite an adventure. I have not had internet here for quite some time, so I ended up taking a trip up north to retrieve my Starlink dish, and that was an adventure in itself. Got to see how the land has changed up there, so that's a topic for another video, but there'll be more news to come there. But I was able to retrieve the Starlink dish. Finally got it up recently, but in the meantime, I went and participated at the annual preppers meet, and that was a really good test of my gear because it was a long trip out, drop in for a couple of nights, and then back away I went. And it was a really good test of whether or not the gear and my way of doing things would work for a quick setup, quick tear down, and away I went. And it did. And then later on, I had to pivot around, and that's going to be part of the main story, so I won't get too deeply into it. But I was going on vacation in the Maritimes with my girlfriend, and I ran into a bit of a situation that required me to make use of my preps. And so that turned out to be a really good test of my concept. And so I'll be talking a little bit about that during the show, maybe. And oh gosh, since then I'm trying to streamline my gear some more. And I'm about to test a new piece of gear, the Bravo bottle that I recently purchased. And I'm going to be featuring that in a first impressions video. And then soon, probably a series of different tests and comparisons. So that's what I've got going on my end. Otherwise, always adapting and getting ready for new situations as I am now.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been a busy guy. So, sorry. So with that, we'll kind of move on to the main topic, which is prepper situations and the importance of mindset. So Eric actually threw a few things on here, and I'll just take from his because it more or less was what I had. So I'll start off with the first one, and it's understanding common prepper scenarios, just common things. So you basically have three topics or three parts of it: a natural disaster, a man-made disaster, and a personal emergency. So from the natural disaster side of it, it is as it says. You're preparing for a natural disaster: a hurricane, a tornado, earthquake, a flood, whatever other natural event may come your way. Obviously, depending on where you live, you may not have to prepare for some of those things. I mean, if you live in more or less the central United States, chances of you preparing for a hurricane are low, but having a hurricane or having a tornado is pretty high. Same thing with an earthquake. Earthquakes are more or less a West Coast thing, not 100%, but if they're going to happen to an extent of a lot of damage and collapsed buildings and that, it's going to happen along the West Coast. So floods, yeah, they're everywhere, and they seem to be everywhere this year. They've been all over the place. Just in our general area down towards Toronto today or yesterday, they had another more or less torrential rainstorm, and Pearson Airport, the major airport, the 401, the 403 area into Mississauga, they all got flooded. Today, just about a 20-minute drive north of me in a small town there, they got hammered with rain. People were out in their floaties in the parking lot of the Canadian Tire, bobbing around in the water that was up to their almost up to their waist. So, wow. You know, so what we're kind of getting at is it's the importance of having a plan that's tailored to your regional risks. So, you know, look at your regional risks, rank them in a priority, and kind of go from there. The man-made disasters is kind of what it is. It's a man-made thing. We have here a power grid failure. That could be a natural disaster as well, for sure. Cyber attacks, we've been seeing them growing exponentially lately, and they've been hitting a lot of significant infrastructure, shall we say. And civil unrest. If anybody's been kind of watching and paying attention to what's been going on in Europe and that with the civil unrest over there, it's been pretty intense. I'm not saying it's going to make its way over here, but you never know. There's lots of protests that seem to go on every weekend. And so, you know, just identify your potential threats and the vulnerabilities in your area. And the last item is personal emergencies. So you've lost your job. Is that an emergency? Sure it is. Absolutely. A health crisis or some other personal life event. So build a support system and try to have a bit of a financial safety net. I know it's tough. Trust me. We all, or for the most part, we all live paycheck to paycheck. And, you know, it's harder and harder to make ends meet every day. And we all understand that. I understand that. So, you know, just try to have some kind of a safety net if you can. Put a little bit away here and there, and if you can, and don't touch it, and it's tough, and it's a tough time out there, but do the best you can, and it'll work out for you in the end.
That's a big one. Today, I think everybody in the country is feeling that financial pressure, and a lot of prepper things are about being ready for economic times too. We've seen plenty of times where, and I know personally, where a dip in financial health hits you, and you feel really grateful because you've got enough canned goods on hand, you get enough food to run with, you've got enough supplies to work with, and you've got enough stuff on hand that you can keep on going to a certain degree. And you're not going to have the luxuries in life when you're running into those times. But if you've had a little bit of time to prepare in advance and squirrel away a few good things, you can get there somewhere. I'm at the point now where, with the whole economic times being the way they are, I'm starting to put more money into dry foods, a lot more dry foods. So we're talking beans. So again, this is all about the financial times that we're living under. I'm okay right now working, but thinking ahead, right? So that's a big one. I notice we have a lot in here about mindset and preparedness. And so staying calm under pressure, I think, is a big one. Life throws all kinds of curveballs at you. And I know I'm going through a whole bunch right now, and that's fine. The most important thing is to stay centered and not get off base, right? Keep your life's mission in mind. And there's all kinds of ways to handle stress, the anxiety that emergencies bring around. One of the big ones is trying to lead a good, sane life, in terms of what you're putting into your body, right? A lot of people will damage themselves by going into various different kinds of substance abuse during hard times, and that doesn't help you either. So, staying calm, right? Having a healthy outlet for that stress is a big one. Get some time outdoors. Get away from a screen, folks. Being adaptable. A lot of what I've lived through in the last couple of years has been all about being adaptable and flexible. And so we're going to have all kinds of real life examples about that in a short little while. But that kind of way of thinking bleeds over into the rest of your life. So it's not just about being prepared for external emergencies that will come and hit you every now and then. There's also real life stuff that's not of the natural disaster, but more of the personal emergencies that Jeff was talking about. And those you can ride in various different ways, but a mindset of being flexible and able to adapt to whatever life throws your way is going to go a long way, to use the same word again, to getting you on track, right? Whenever situations change.
And from if I can just throw a comment in there,
Yeah.
You said staying calm under pressure. That's, to me, that's huge, because if you're not panicking, you're not. Panicking leads to bad decisions, and bad decisions lead to even worse problems.
Every time.
Is staying calm under pressure difficult? Sure it is. Your mind's racing, your body's going, but like I say, if you can't stay calm, or at least a little bit of calmness under that pressure, it's not going to help things. People who may be relying on you to be that voice of reason or that calm of reason, now all of a sudden they're going, oh, wait a minute. So yeah, I just think that's a big one for me.
I think it's a good one to actually emphasize, Jeff, because if you've got the ability to stay calm in those kinds of situations, and sometimes this means having mental health coping mechanisms, and I'll throw a couple out here just for those of you who need examples in coping mechanisms. And a lot of these are old school, old fashioned, and I tend to rely a lot on those because it works. Like sleeping on a big decision. Sleeping on a big decision, that's a really big one. If you're tired near the end of the day, right, you might have your whole day's work in you, or a whole day's worth of your daily challenges, even if you're not going to work, even if you're a homemaker, you're taking care of children all day long. Well, that puts on a certain adrenaline load through the day of watching out for all these things that you're going to need to be watching out for when you're in charge of, one or more children, because that's a form of chaos unto itself, right? So the what I'm talking about here is the ability to, if you get hit with something that's really hard, really difficult, seemingly impossible to handle, you don't have to decide right away. Sometimes you can take a breath. Sometimes you can delay a decision. Not always. Sometimes you have to act now. But if you can delay a decision, and sometimes that's all you need to think about things a little more, take a few deep breaths, make a phone call, right? Go and Google a thing or two, right? All of the things that we can do to ease our minds when we're dealing with that urgent kind of pressure situation. Another one is to look to somebody who has had experience with these sorts of things, right? You're not the first one out there to have problems or emergencies or sudden things that you have to deal with in life. Everybody else has too. And what you'll find is that if you're talking to somebody who's got a little bit more time in than you, somebody who might have a little bit more white hair on their heads, perhaps, or if they don't have any left on their head, maybe on their face, right? If they've got a lot of white hair, there's a chance they might have seen things that you are new to, but not to them, right? And so again, this is why I like to talk a lot about having that safety network of people, right? People who might have more experience than you. If you don't have those people around you, try to cultivate those relationships. Try to find those people who know a little bit more than you, have a bit more experience than you, and that maybe you look up to. And try to spend some time with them if you can. And over time, you might find that you can emulate some of their behaviors, and you pick up some of their mental coping mechanisms and the mindset that comes along with being that way. So just little pieces of advice I can give out there to people who might be wondering, how do I learn to do this, right? Being adaptable. How do I learn to be calm under pressure, right? A good part, again, is having that healthy outlet for the stress. And one that's big for me is in action. I'm a big fan of action. So a lot of people will fall into fear, as Jeff mentioned earlier. And when you fall into fear, you're sometimes paralyzed, right? A lot of people get paralyzed by fear, and then they will look for direction from some sort of external authority. And we know where that leads sometimes, according to history. So I'm a big fan of action. And so we've got some talking points here about building up your preparedness mindset, right? And the first one, in my opinion, and we've got a little bit further deep in there, but it's being situationally aware, right? First, being aware that you may not know everything you need to know, right? That's a start. Then you can start being aware of what's around you a little more in a different way, right? What's unknown around you. Try to figure that out, right? Be familiar with it, recognize it, right? Understand it. This is how you should approach any environment, right? Being situationally aware. What have I got around me? So you can do this quickly. Over time, you'll learn to do this naturally. You walk into a room, you'll find every exit, you'll find every back door, you'll find every wall, you'll find every piece of cover, and you'll have, over time, develop the ability to also look at people in a conscious manner, not just unconsciously, right? But it first starts by being conscious. So situational awareness is a really huge one.
And it's funny you say that, because I didn't realize right away, but I've had a couple people tell me that they're like, every time you walk in a room, you take like 5 seconds and you glance the room. Somebody asked me, why do you do that? Exactly what you said. I want to know where the exits are. I want to know that if something happens, which way am I going to run to get out of here? Or where am I going to go to get cover? Or, and it's only 5 seconds. Like it's not like I'm standing there for 10 minutes trying to process everything. And a lot of the time, like, that person brought it to my attention. I wasn't even realizing at that point that I was even doing it. It just kind of became a thing. And so.
Jeff is right. It's not something that takes effort. It's like a mental habit, kind of like remembering to tie your shoes. And if you know how to tie your shoes, you can probably remember to scan a room when you walk into it, right? It's just a matter of being aware of it. If you're the kind of person that wears shoes without shoelaces because you forget to tie them, well, that's a whole other matter, and probably for another show. I don't know if I have advice for you on that one. But going on with that situational awareness, being aware is step number one. Then you can move into action. And the biggest one about action, in my opinion, is don't struggle don't right away think when you run into a struggle, okay, I'm going to go and get somebody else to do this for me. See if you can do it yourself. Think of every challenge as an opportunity to learn something new and different. And so the two things we talk about here in amongst our community, and I know I'm not the only one at all by any means, but I do talk a lot about self-sufficiency. And throughout my entire life, I've been all about continuous learning. I've been involved in training people, but I also have this thirst for learning. If you combine those two things, you can then put action behind any kind of fear or stress or anxiety you might feel about what's happening around you that you don't have control over. And just by equipping yourself with more knowledge, even though you don't have all the money and the gear, and believe me, there's a ton of free stuff out there to get a lot of good, great knowledge. Now, we'll talk maybe a quick side note here on finding sources of knowledge, right? Good knowledge isn't truly knowledge for you until you've tested it with time and experience. Okay, test it with time and experience. It means you have to do it. It's not enough to go out and read about it. That's what I call a piece of information that's in your head, but it's not really real in your body, in your experience level until you've gone out and done it. So if you have in this approach for your continuous learning of, okay, I'm going to go seek out a little bit of information, and with that, I'm going to go and prepare a plan to put it into action. I'm going to try this new piece of information that I picked up. I'm going to test myself, maybe in an environment that's not critical. You know what I mean? If you've never built a fire before, don't go take a 3-hour drive to be completely off the grid by yourself without a vehicle to first learn how to build a fire. Okay. Make sure that you crawl, walk, and run. One thing we don't want to see is people putting themselves in harm's way without thinking about what they're doing first and having had a little bit of time to practice these things. So if you're going to do what I recommend, which is adopt a mindset of continuous learning, of self-sufficiency, crawl, walk, run. If you've never done maintenance on your car before, start small. Learn how to change a tire when a flat happens, because that's probably the most likely thing to occur to you, or that your battery fails at some point. So know how to boost a car, right? These are really basic things, but if you've never done them before, start with that before you think, okay, I'm going to go ahead and build the ultimate survival camp, for example. Right? I'm just giving you examples here that I think I would recommend to those who are looking at getting into this way of doing things. What do you think, Jeff?
Absolutely. You're 100% on there. And how many people can't change a tire? I bet you there's a lot more than we think. I just want to go to a comment in the live chat from Aqua Run Girl. And her comment was, she said, major floods in Montreal suburb last week. I'm not in a flood zone, but thousands affected all around me. Now authorities are talking about bug out bags and preparedness. I guess my comment to that is that's typical government, reactionary, not precautionary. It happened. Now they're saying, oh, okay, now you should have a bug out bag. Now they're talking about preparedness. They should have been talking about that already. I mean, all governments have a minister of emergency preparedness. I don't know what they do, but, I'm assuming if she's on here, she's 100 yards ahead of everybody else and already has that stuff. And she did make the comment that said, that's why we listen to you guys. I appreciate that. thanks for that. That's why we're here. We're not here for anything else, just to try and help people out as best we can when they're in a pickle.
This is a wonderful comment. So there are a couple of things to highlight there. So who thinks that they're going to be in a flood zone, right? If they're in an urban area where everything just normally works. But, let's do a quick risk analysis of Montreal. Montreal is not a new town. It's been around for quite a while. Its infrastructure is aging, like any very old town here in Canada. And so it's prone to failure. And if you're telling me, oh, geez, shouldn't the city be replacing everything that's old? Yeah, sure. Do you have all the money to replace it all? Because they have to prioritize what they replace, right? They have to look after the problem areas first, and those keep them plenty busy. So that's why in a city like this, you're going to have occasional events where water mains break, things occur where they don't normally. And so now you've got all kinds of problems. And as she's saying, now they're talking about bug-out bags and preparedness, right? I remember a time when Emergency Preparedness Canada talked about being ready for 30 days worth of food and water in the house. That was back in the 90s. And then now they had us down to 3 days or something like this before.
Well, 72 hours. They say you should be prepared to be on your own for 72 hours, which, that's just not going to cut it.
72 hours is what I might have in my backpack when I go out for a 1 hour walk in the wilderness in case I break a leg and I'm stuck out there for 3 days till somebody figures out, where's frugal, right? So it's really a case of mindset, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, think of how hard life is after 3 days without food. What are you like when you don't have that kind of food around in the house? I don't know. I think we can do better than and go above and beyond the minimum things that government recommends.
Yeah,
that would be really a great approach, wouldn't it?
And
that being said, yes.
Nope. No, I was just going to say you already touched on it. One of the things I had on there, we can kind of speak on a bit, was you talked about the community mindset as well. So so you have your personal mindset, but then a bit of a community mindset. So building a strong network. So the importance of connecting with like-minded individuals and groups for mutual support. You talked about that on the mental health side of it, Gunny, of having that mutual support and knowing that if you have to, if you can fix it yourself, and you should try to fix it yourself, but if you need help or you need assistance, you know who you can go to. We call them MAGs, a mutual assistance group. So, a lot of us in the preparedness world have a MAG, and we have those people in our group, like an electrician and a plumber and somebody who can fix small motors and, that kind of stuff that can help in those kind of emergencies. And that too, going way back to the very first thing we talked about of being calm under pressure, is knowing that resource is there will be a major calming effect. You go in, you're like, I'm going to try and fix this myself. Okay, I can't, but I know that Bob over there can, and I'm not going to sweat over it. I'm not going to lose sleep. I'm going to go ask Bob, and I'm not going to get Bob to do it for me. I'm going to do it, but have him show me how to do it. That's the important part to me. Is I'm very much of I'm not much of a visual learner. Put something up on a board and write it there. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. I need to do it. I need to get my hands on it. I need to touch it. And a lot of what I've learned, that's how I learned it. So
I think sometimes that's one of the best ways to learn is basically based on your situation. It's very difficult to motivate oneself to learn something if there's no need for that thing. right? And so unless you've been caught with your pants down at some point and never want to have that again, or perhaps you were in a role where it was your job to think ahead of those things, it might take you a while to take on these habits. And so it's not a bad thing to start cultivating those relationships, like you're saying. And I want to highlight a really big response here from Aquarun Girl here, saying, am I wrong to think that mags take years to build? So to build the relationships so that you have trust in your mutual assistance group, in your mag, that will take years. And I can't stress enough that you have to spend time with one another. So virtual is not quite enough. You want to meet in person. Old school bonds were formed that way for millennia. And I think that's the fastest way to get to know people. When I was in a profession of green, we spent 24/7 with guys that we did not know until we met them. And then within 6 to 7 weeks, I was closer with those guys than with my own family. But that's just because I spent 24 hours, 7 days a week for the better part of 6 to 7 weeks at a time, sometimes longer. And that really brings you closer. So yes, it can take years to build, but you can speed that up, right? There's ways to accelerate that. And that is to meet together and to go through planning iterations, cycles, right? Give yourselves challenges, give yourselves missions, work together on common goals, right? Give yourselves a common mission. Today, we're going to go here and do this. And then you mobilize one another. And I'm going to say this, it's not always easy. A little bit like herding cats, like the old expression, it can be. And that's mostly because in Canada, people are very dispersed. Now, if you're in a city, and it sounds like you might be, then you'll find that there are relatively natural mutual assistance groups that will be created around you. So those might be your immediate neighbors. They might be people in your own cultural and family community, right? So you might have people in the city and around you that are family members or that you work with. That's another avenue of meeting people. Now, one thing I can tell you is that if you're going out there and advertising, hey, I want to prep with you, people might look at you like you're a little bit nuts, and that's okay. We're used to that here in the prepper world. But there's ways to approach this in a quiet, discreet manner, right? You can always talk about, oh, I've got my little collection of preserves. And if you sometimes drop that you've got a little bit of a hoard of food there, hey, you don't want to go advertising this, right? There were times in history where it was dangerous to advertise that you've got a hoard of food. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just go search in history. There's all kinds of times when authorities and brigands, not well-to-doers, right, came to your house and took your food and your stuff. So you do want to be discreet if you can, but you will find that there are natural avenues. If there is somebody in your building who's really, really handy, that might be somebody I would put in my network of people. And how do you find that out? Well, you might ask them something. Hey, how did you learn how to do that? That's what I often ask. How and where did you learn about this stuff? Right? Somebody here in the comments is saying they usually start off talking about gardening, growing veggies. I think that's wonderful, right? These are areas where I'm lacking. So whenever I hear somebody talking about things that I don't know much about, I'm always very curious and I pay attention. And the other thing you can do is, and again, this takes a little bit of bravery and it means you're putting yourself out there a little bit. You might want to be willing to help others out with things that you are very good at. So for example, I have a particular skill at working with computers and networks and technology and low voltage systems. So I'm not afraid to delve into different kinds of problems that others might be shy to deal with. I'm not as strong as in those as I am in other areas. So I have to, if I'm aware of what those are, then I can talk to other people I know who know a little bit more. Or the moment I know them a little bit more, man, I can pick their brain and ask them where if they got something they could recommend to a newbie. This is what I love. I tell people, hey, what about a newbie like me who doesn't know anything about that? Where can I go and learn a little bit more about that? And if they're willing to tell you, you might have somebody there that you can potentially add to your network of people, especially if they offer you to consult them anytime, right? So
Yep. Well,
Jeff.
I ran into that. Actually, it was last summer, but I was down at the trailer, and it's a trailer park. There's quite a few people, but I've been there for a while, and I know a lot of people. Anyways, I happen to be walking around with my podcast T-shirt on, and somebody come over and about the and I was ready for the "you guys are nuts," and it was totally the opposite. This person got, I'm not going to say converted. That's about it, but got concerned about everything that was going on around COVID at that time, and how you couldn't go to a store and you couldn't do this, and he became the last person I would ever think of. He became a hardcore prepper, like and so I mean, we sat down around the bonfire for like about 3 hours and just talked about different thoughts and different ideas and that's just the way it went. Aquagirl says in the chat, started a conversation with somebody at Home Depot today. People are happy to share when you ask them. Yep.
I have to agree 100%. If you're willing to put yourself out there and just ask, man, often people will give you all kinds of advice, even in places where they're there to make money from you. Like the Home Depot. Sometimes the people I have been there to ask a question of, I'm honest, I've never done this before, especially when we get to plumbing. Man, I know next to nothing about plumbing. So I'm the first one to ask when I'm in the plumbing department looking for something. And very often they'll give me tips I really hadn't thought of. Stuff you just won't easily get. And it's task specific, right? So you don't have to wade through a whole pile of weird web pages and videos and search results that aren't relevant. You can go right and talk to somebody who's a bit of a subject matter expert.
And there's a comment in here right now, and actually it's an awesome comment by Shelter Fire Water First Aid and Rescue. What a name. But hey, I often talk to seniors on how they survived during the war and hard times. 100%. If you want to know, how people in, the dirty 30s and the wars and stuff, how did they survive? You want to know resources? I'll tell you, they're full of them. So
yes, those are your real life examples of those who have come before us.
Yep.
They are a rich resource, and they can tell us a lot about mindset. Just spending time with them, you'll find that they handle emergencies and situations a little better than today's highly technologically connected people.
Yep.
And that's because they had to rely on their own common sense. And common sense isn't common. It has to be often acquired and built through lots of knuckle scrapes and tears and maybe a few cuts, bleeds here and there, right? Little bumps. But that's how you go about these things. I'll give you a couple of other real life examples where preparedness mindset came in really handy for me on a number of occasions. Right? Number of occasions. I'm just talking about simple little things like going to go get groceries not far from my work. I'm at the Costco and I've just come back to get to load up my truck. And there's a fellow there who can't get his truck started. And he looked a little bit helpless, and he looks at me and he goes, "Do you know anything about cars?" As I'm walking over to my truck. And I don't know if it's because of all the doodads hooked up to my truck that he thought that maybe I might. But, he actually had the courage to engage me. And when I'm on a mission, I'm not exactly the most engaging guy. I'm all about getting into my truck and getting my stuff out of there and getting on my way. But he stopped and asked me, "Hey, I got a problem here." And it happened to be something I know a lot about. The thing wouldn't start. And yet was sparking with his cable and he was trying to start it. And so I kind of had an idea what might be going on. And so I had him come out of the truck and we looked at it, and it was just something really simple, guys. It was a negative battery terminal that was a bit loose. That was really dumb, but he was about to call a CAA or something like that. He was trying to figure out if he needed to call a tow truck. And I told him, just a sec. I reached into the back of my own truck. I pulled up my pickup truck in front of his. I fired up my big lights so we could see inside of his truck without a problem. Went to the back of my truck and grabbed my little Weve driver kit. In there, I've got all kinds of screwdrivers, and I've also got wrenches, little wrenches. And it was a weird arrangement. It was some kind of Ford terminal with a weird 90-degree fitting to get itself to fit in there. Anyway, I'd never seen anything like that before, so it took me a moment to figure it out. But with a little wrench and about 3 minutes worth of fussing around, it was fastened. And he was off and running again. He was so happy. He gave me a $20 little bonus money, right? A little $20 tip. I was just there because I knew exactly what he had going on, and he had his family there in the truck with him. And all of a sudden he couldn't start it, and he was helpless. And all he needed was a wrench. And somebody who knew a little bit about 12 volts, 12 volt systems. So, right. He took a moment to ask. Had he not asked, right, he might have had a towing ticket that day, and somebody who might not have been honest and told him he needed a new battery. And when I told him, I said, "Oh, it looks like somebody forgot to properly fasten the negative cable here, the ground cable, when they last serviced your vehicle." He says, "Oh, that was me. I changed the battery out last winter." So he was able to actually get through most of the season without properly torquing that battery terminal on. Right? And that's just something silly. So self-sufficiency, right? He learned something really big that day. You got to torque those down really good like you mean it, right? So hard way to learn a lesson, but now he'll remember it.
Yep.
So I just a little example of how having a couple of little hand tools on hand and being calm. He was panicked because he had his wife and he had his kids in the car, and he had a pile of groceries, right? So he was panicked. So his mind was not straight. He was freaking out. Saw me walking calmly to my truck with all the doodads on it. And he probably went, maybe he knows something. And sure enough. So that worked out really well for him. And happy feelings for me, right? I felt good about being able to help somebody. And that's a big one. If you help somebody out, you'll often find you have an ally there later. And that's another great way to build up a mag. And that goes a long way as well.
Yep.
Another really big example. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No. If you've got another example, go ahead.
I have all kinds. I've got all kinds because these are recent for me. These are all very recent. Another one. So I'm ready to go on vacation. What's the vacation? I'm renting a van with my sweetheart, and we're going to sleep in it with an air mattress and tour the Maritimes. That's great, right? Because you get to your camping site and you're up and running in 5 seconds. Okay, maybe 10 minutes to set up camp, and you're sleeping, right? And if it gets really hot, you've got air conditioning. So that was the plan. The van was rented and reserved. So all is well. 2 days before picking up the van, I get an email from the rental company. So I had booked this rental through Expedia. Expedia was really good in their customer service, but the rental service was through an actual rental company. And I won't name the rental company. I don't need to. So I got this email from the rental company less than 2 days before going to pick it up. And here was the gist of the email. So you're coming to pick up this van. You're going to need to show proof of having commercial insurance. So I don't know about most of you, but if you've got a personal vehicle, you do not have commercial insurance. So that was a fun little thing to think about. And the other thing is they hit me with a 20 cents a kilometer charge all of a sudden, which they had not disclosed at the beginning of the rental because this was a prepaid deposit from multiple months ago. And they also wanted to take another $1,500 off of my payment card. And so that was just unacceptable to me at the moment. I remember thinking, well, that's a scam. I'm not going to do business with somebody who is doing this to me. So had I been in the not calm way of thinking, I probably would have panicked and found a way to pay all of that, and I would have been ripped off. And so instead, I calmly thought about alternatives. And I remembered that I live a highly mobile lifestyle, and that I have a truck that can handle this ride, and that it's been maintained and serviced, and that I've got all the gear in it. And I know it because I carefully packed it the weekend previous after displaying my gear at the annual preppers meet. So with less than 48 hours to beginning our vacation, we simply made a huge change of plans, decided we were going to take my truck and we were going to be camping, real camping in a tent for the remainder of those 11 days. And you know what? It was the most wonderful experience. And I saved a lot of money, right? I got refunded by the rental company that tried to shaft me. Expedia was very good about it. So, that's a good shout out to a good service there, even though they're, an aggregator of services. They were pretty good about refunding me quickly. So that's just another example of where your mindset and having a minimum level of preparedness allows you to quickly pivot and change plans. And it's not a major disruption to your life. Right? While I was out there on this vacation, though, I did run into some payment issues that some of you may have run into as well during that time. We had some payment systems problems out there. And so once again, my habit of always having cash in my wallet helped out, because you can usually buy just about anything with cash these days, right? And so I was able to get gas and get food and all those things, and didn't have to worry about putting a whole bunch of stuff on my credit card because I had cash on hand, even though Interac was down. So try to always think of like those folks who survived through hard times, right? Have things on hand that you need when you need it. Don't throw things away if they're still of use. These are the ways the old folks went. They fixed things as much as possible. And I know we live in a culture today where things are not as fixable as they used to be. And so that might be our fault as consumers for buying things that aren't fixable. And so, whoa, what are you doing, Frugal? You're blaming us for our condition? No, I am making us co-owners of our condition, right? If we buy things that we can't maintain, we must co-own that and realize that we are now jamming ourselves into a corner. So think of all your electronics, all of your cars, all of your doodads that you buy. If you know that they can't be maintained, and this is one way, again, to maintain preparedness, right? When you buy and look at a thing, before you buy and look at a thing, stop and think, can I maintain this? Will it last? Is it even good? Right? Because that's something people don't think about, right? Is it even good? Right? And again, this is where you can call a friend, right? Rely on that network of people you might have built up, right? So it's about stopping and thinking most of the time, I think, isn't it, Jeff?
Yep, absolutely. And so one of the things that I know I'm guilty of sometimes, and I would tend to say probably all preppers are at some point, is recognizing the dangers of becoming complacent in your preparedness efforts. We'll talk about this a bit further down. You don't have to be a 24/7 prepper. That's not what I'm saying. But recognizing, like the dangers of becoming complacent by saying, oh, okay, I did 75% of this. That's enough. I don't need to do any more. 75% is great. Don't get me wrong. You've got a good leg up on everybody else. But are you 100% there? No. So, and I understand, and we talked about it further up about the money thing. And, I've had people say to me, oh, I've got all this food stored up, and I'm looking at it and thinking to myself, well, why am I not eating that? Because I have got hundreds of dollars of food just sitting there. Yeah, you do, but when you can't get food, that money or that $100 that you spent is going to be a good investment. So, it's a real gray area. It's a fine line to walk, but maybe try to find some strategies to stay motivated and engaged in your continuous prepping, understanding that it's not a 24/7 thing.
A good way to do that, I think, Jeff, and this is one way I do it. When I think and I perceive that there might be a gap in something in terms of my way of preparedness, I like to bounce it off of others that I think are a little bit more prepared than I am in that respect. And that's a good way to learn a lot more about it, right? And you might find out that, no, you're plenty prepped and it's just a perception issue. So one thing that a good friend and I always say to one another is, I think there's a gap in my preps. And then we start the conversation this way. And we usually know what this means. Hey, we might get into a rabbit hole here, but sometimes it's a 5-minute conversation, right? And it's the end of the conversation and you just exchange one or quick tip and away you go. So I love the idea of reaching out to people in that respect in terms of staying motivated, right? Keeping that continuous look at what you've got, right? Where are the gaps, right? And a good way to look at that, and we got this in our notes, is looking at your fears and uncertainties. If you got fear and uncertainty about something in your preps, that's an opportunity to improve your preps, right? So what is it that you've got that fear and uncertainty about? And I want to encourage you here to not really go down the really, really deep rabbit holes. And so if you're really, really concerned about climate change affecting your everyday life and your shortage of food today, I'm going to tell you that that's okay. It's not an invalid concern, but there are more immediate pressing concerns in terms of your food safety that will affect your food safety than climate change, right? Those are season to season things. But in this day and age, transportation of goods is your most immediate challenge to your getting food in the most people that I know, right? Unless you're incredibly self-sufficient, most of us rely on stores. And so you are reliant on things you have no control over. And so if you can realize that, again, you can start thinking of, okay, I have identified that gap and now I can figure out a way to address it, right?
And that's going way back to my supply chain issue, right?
Yes.
Problems with the supply chain. Like you say, you're used to going to the store and getting it. What happens if the store doesn't have it now?
Yep.
Right?
Canadians are highly dependent on supply chains. Unless you're a farmer, and even the farmer is dependent on supply chain. Show me a farmer, unless you're Amish I think it's pretty safe to say that just about every farmer relies on petroleum or some kind of fuel or some kind of chemicals to do their farming, right? At the very least, they're going to need implements and tools of some kind, tractors, right? Because yes, you can farm on your own with a plow, and yes, the Amish still do it this way, and they are productive people. Nobody's going to deny that. But you don't know how to do that, and neither do I. And most modern farmers today who do it at scale need a whole lot of tooling and implementations of that tooling and the whole supply chain behind it to maintain that, to keep it running. So again, we keep focusing on talk to people that who are doing better than you in your preps, right? And you will find that this goes a long way to doing the fear and uncertainty.
Just like Brandon in the live chat said, he said the quote, "I think there's a gap in my preps," is a fantastic way to start a conversation.
Oh, and another follow-up comment from Brandon says he's a farmer, and without diesel, everything comes grinding to a halt. And that's exactly right. Yep. So if you've been watching watching what's going on here in Canada, we have this thing called a carbon tax, and it's the reason why your food has gone up immensely in price. Is the very equipment the farmers use to keep plowing fields and doing what they do runs on fuel, and that's being taxed more and more every day. So
and then the fuel in the trucks to get that stuff from that farmer's field to the store, that's all being taxed. And don't let's not go there. It's just going to be a bad conversation if we do.
That's a different podcast, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a
Monday
night podcast.
Yes, exactly. wrong day for that. But all that being said, right, we've discussed here all kinds of ways that you can apply mindset. These are real world ways to apply your mindset. And if you're already at a point where you've got a mutual assistance group, you're now learning and adapting and testing your knowledge, you're now maybe in a stage to balance that out, because I think it's pretty easy. And we know there's all kinds of myths, and we popularize these in film and all that, of the mad prepper who's gone and got everything now, but is gone completely mad. And so that's about maintaining balance. So try to maintain balance, right? There is real life out there, not just what's imagined and what could be coming and what is potential. You have to also be present in there for you and your family to live in the everyday. So try not to get too badly wrapped up in the news. It's good to be situationally aware. And again, my friends and I, we often discuss this. What's the fine line, right? I just do news scans, folks. I don't do deep dives into anything anymore because it's not useful to my time, right? My time is best spent learning new things, networking with people who keep a level head throughout emergencies and who focus on their own preps too. And when I surround myself with people who think and live that way, I find that I'm able to emulate them, and I'm able to share what I've learned, and we just grow stronger. And so remember to spend time with your family and your friends. And if you can include your mutual assistance group amongst your family and friends, that's a pretty good deal too, right? And it can be infectious, as we've heard today. So do feel free to share this information and share our podcast with others if you think that you know other people who might be thinking the same way as you.
And like I mentioned earlier, and I'll touch back on it kind of maybe as a bit of a closing thing, unless you've got more stuff, kind of is you need to maintain your preparedness mindset without becoming overwhelmed. Find that balance between being prepared and just enjoying life. If you are in that mindset 24/7, you're going to burn yourself out really quickly. And I can say, I went down to the trailer there back a few weeks ago, and I spent 10 days down there, and I more or less cut myself off from everything. There's no television down there. I could get it if I wanted. I don't. I didn't take my laptop, so I wasn't connected to the internet. I did have my phone. My thought process on that was, if something really big happens, the people who are in our podcast network on our Signal group, they're going to let me know something's cooking. So, I could do that because I had a confidence in my preparedness. Am I 100% there? Absolutely not, by no means. And I'm not trying to come across as that kind of person, because I'm far from it. But I felt comfortable enough in my preps that I could do that. And I did it. And I'll tell you, it did me a world of good. It really did. I lounged around in the pool. if I felt like it, if I felt like talking to people, it's a 10-minute walk into town to grab a Tim Hortons or something. But just cutting off and getting away, you've got to do it. Not just from prepping, but just society in general. And you have to take time for yourself, and you need to enjoy life. And you may find, and I'll use an analogy here. So I go with a bunch of friends. Eric's one of them. And we go out into the middle of nowhere for a weekend. We're gone for 4 days on a fishing trip. There's no cell phone connections there. There's nothing. We do communication by ham radio. So you're getting away and you're just kind of enjoying, but you're also testing your preps. You're knowing, can I last that 4 days with what I have? Do I have enough to, now I'll admit we come pretty well prepared, but it's just, and, I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, that's almost a way to practice your prep. And yeah, you've got stuff and you get out there in the middle of nowhere, but it's good practice and it's healthy.
Could not agree more. And I think it's a great way to end it. I absolutely encourage people to test out their gear, go out there, get out there in the outdoors, disconnect from the news and the tech, right? If you can get into a completely off the grid situation, and I mean off the cell grid, so, get far out there away from things, man, it's worth it. Now, do it smartly, right? Plan your way through it. And again, you can rely on the people in your mutual assistance group to help you with that. If you've never gone camping, start with that. Crawl, walk, run. And you'll find it's definitely worth it.
And the other thing to just remember to people, or comment if I can make it at the close, is this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a continuous journey. It's not a one-time effort. It's a marathon. And yeah, if you think you're going to be prepped up and ready to go in weeks, it's not going to happen. So embrace the mindset as part of your identity. I'm proud to be a prepper. I know, there's people out there that for whatever reason, they have this mindset that, well, if you're a prepper, you walk around in camo all the time, and you've got a bunker full of all of this other stuff and everything. Are there people out there like that? Yeah, there are. Sure. They're the people you may not want to connect with too much, but, just embrace the mindset. And if you can incorporate it into your lifestyle, it's going to make things a lot more enjoyable. Yeah. Any closing comments on that, Gunny? Or?
Oh man, I am going to add just one more thing, but it's just going to dovetail into what you just said. The true Canadian way is just to be reasonable about it, right? So, avoid those people that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because they're just a little too extreme one way or another. If you know people who are just reasonable folks who are into readiness, man, I think that's a great way to go. And I wouldn't add much more than that.
All right. Well, it's been that was a good part. And I really enjoyed the people in the live chat popping up with their ideas. That was great. That's what we're looking for. This isn't us. This isn't just the two of us. It's the community. It's all of us around. So, to the people in the live chat, I give you a big thank you for being part of what we do here. So with that, we really don't have a podcast challenge. All I would say is we've talked about a lot of stuff. Just take away something that we've said and try to work with it somehow. So we've got a couple of upcoming events. Terry will be happy about this. We have the annual Preppers Meet 2025 As Gunny mentioned earlier, he was at the last one. I was there. Unfortunately, we couldn't connect. I had to leave before he got there, but I'm all in next year. So hopefully we can meet face to face. And the dates are July 10th to 13th, 2025. Location is still to be determined, but it will probably be back at the Slovenian hunt camp there, just north of Alliston. Great place.
Great location. I would go back anytime. I will be there.
Oh, yeah. And something that I never really touched, or we haven't brought up as events till somebody in the Discord asked, TACCOM 2024 is coming back. It is the weekend of September 6th, 7th, and 8th at the International Center in Mississauga. So just go to the TACCOM website. I believe it's just TACCOM, TACCOM.com, or something similar to that. Google it, it'll pop up and see what's there. So unfortunately, I won't be there. That coincides with my second fishing weekend. So I do have to make priorities or give up some stuff at some point. So on a quick weather blurb. So as we speak, the East Coast is kind of more or less preparing for the remnants of Hurricane Ernesto. It's expected to maybe impact the southern tip of Newfoundland. Nova Scotia might get a little bit of rain from the outer bands. That's it. So, for the vast part of the storm, it was a fish storm, which was a good thing. It made landfall in Bermuda, but it was thought to become possibly a high-end Cat 2 or Cat 3 hurricane. It ended up only being a Category 1. I'm not aware of any significant damage. Unfortunately, there were 3 deaths that they've attributed to the storm, but it's from people not heeding the warnings. Even though this storm is 100 miles out in the ocean, a storm of that magnitude causes disruption to the flow of water, and you get a thing called a rip current. Anybody who knows about that at all, basically, the water comes ashore and it scoots back into the ocean in a current that is strong. And unfortunately, 3 people did not pay attention to that, and they drowned off the coast of 2 of them in South Carolina and 1 in North Carolina. Folks, they don't put out these warnings for nothing. They don't just do it to be a pain in the butt and to disrupt your vacation. They do it to save your life. Pay attention to them. You may not like it. You may not agree with it. But trust me, you don't want to be one of those 3. So in terms of more hurricanes, not really seeing anything. It's nothing likely to develop right now. The airflow that's coming off of Africa is stronger than anticipated, and it's in a bit of a direction that pushes the hot, dry air from the Sahara over the area where the storms develop, and it kind of kills them. So not much going on there. So I'm not anticipating anything in the next week. Today, there's a slight risk for severe weather over a large portion of the eastern seaboard with the passage of a cold front. That should clear things out, and we should see much cooler, clearer conditions for at least the remainder of the week in the east. Unfortunately, those people on the warm side of that cold front, out in the plains, down in Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, you're still going to see hot, humid conditions, pop up severe storms. So just be aware of that. As has been mentioned in the chat about flooding, I mentioned it briefly. Saturday. So yeah, yesterday, Pearson Airport in Toronto recorded its highest rainfall amount for a 24-hour period since, I I believe it was 93 or 94 was the record, and they broke it by about 4 centimeters. They had, I believe, about 124.8 centimeters in a 24-hour period. That's a lot of rain in one day. So there was a lot of flooding in Peel. I've put stuff on the Discord and stuff like that, but being the weather guy, I'm just saying be aware. So any shout outs there, Gunny?
Oh, none to speak of at this time.
Excellent. So with that, then I'll bring episode 246 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the audio podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please submit a review. It encourages the algorithm to promote us and lets other people find the show.
We record these shows live on YouTube or Facebook if you must. If you want an early peek at the shows, please subscribe to the YouTube channel Canadian Prepper Podcast and click the notifications tab. That will give you alerts when we're going live. You can find me on YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, and the Canadian Prepper Podcast Discord channel.
And if anybody wants to reach out to me, you can send an email to feedback@prepperpodcast.ca, or I am frequently on the Discord. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.
As we wrap up another insightful episode of the Canadian Prepper Podcast, we want to extend our gratitude to our listeners for joining us on this journey of preparedness. Remember, the key to survival is knowledge and readiness. If you want to support the show and engage with our community further, consider signing up for our Patreon and joining our thriving community on Discord. Links are in the description. If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. This is the Canadian Prepper Podcast, signing off. Until next time, be prepared, stay safe, and keep learning.